If someone had told me that my own promotion party would be the night everything fell apart, I probably would have laughed. 6 years with Nova Dynamics, I thought I knew that company inside out, the people, the culture, even the unspoken rules. But what I never could have predicted was how fast everything could change. One single moment. That's all it took. That night, the San Francisco sky was glowing. I stood on the rooftop of a high rise where the company was hosting its quarterly celebration. Warm yellow light strung across the railings, soft jazz playing under the chatter of clinking glasses. It felt like we were all stepping into a new era. I wore a navy blue dress, my coworker once said made me look powerful, and in my mind I was already rehearsing my thank you speech. Ethan Ward, Nova's CEO, had told me 2 weeks earlier, "Madison, get your speech ready. You've earned this." And I believed him. I looked around at the clusters of colleagues raising glasses and laughing. Everyone seemed genuinely happy, while my heart was racing. 6 years of late nights, canceled vacations, and a relationship that fell apart because I always chose work first. But tonight, it would all mean something. Ethan stepped onto a small platform by the bar, holding a glass of red wine. That familiar, confident smile spread across his face as his voice carried through the open air. Thank you all for being here tonight. We've had an incredible quarter, and I want to take a moment to recognize a few outstanding contributors. I stared at him, pulse quickening. His voice had once inspired the whole company, and for me, it meant validation, real recognition. He continued, "Sometimes, true talent doesn't take years to prove itself. Just a few months can be enough to make a real impact." I tilted my head slightly. A few months? I'd been here 6 years. Maybe he was referring to a team, not one person. I smiled faintly, ready for my name. Then Ethan turned toward the right side of the rooftop, where a young woman with blonde hair stood by the cocktail table. "Chloe Bennett," he said, his tone bright and enthusiastic. "We've been deeply impressed by your creativity and drive. In just 3 months, you've shown leadership and innovation that's reshaping how we work. And so, I'm thrilled to announce that you'll be taking on the role of Senior Director of Nova Dynamics." Applause erupted. Chloe's mouth fell open in disbelief before she burst out laughing, eyes shining with pride. I stood still, the wine trembling in my hand. My heart clenched so hard it hurt. Cold sweat gathered on my neck. No one noticed, but I knew. I had just lost everything I'd built. 6 years vanished in 10 seconds. Ethan lifted his glass and looked briefly in my direction, his smile polite but distant. "And of course, Madison, you've always been an essential part of the team. I hope you'll take inspiration from this new generation's energy, right?" Laughter rippled through the crowd like a thin blade cutting the air. Chloe laughed awkwardly, murmuring something like, "Oh, don't say that," but it didn't help. I smiled. A perfect smile, the kind people expect from a woman who knows how to stay composed. I raised my glass and gently tapped a few others nearby. "Congratulations, Chloe. You truly deserve it." My voice was calm, almost sincere. But inside, there was only a void. I heard the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, but everything felt distant, muffled by a haze. When the party ended, the wind from the bay carried the scent of salt and leftover champagne. I stood alone by the railing, looking down at the city lights. Chloe was taking pictures with Ethan and a few others. She turned to wave, but I just nodded and looked away. I didn't hate her. She was just playing the part I once thought was mine. I walked toward the elevator, the click of my heels steady on the wooden floor. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the glass. Calm face, dark eyes. Outside, laughter echoed. Inside, there was only silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt one thing only, emptiness. But within that emptiness, something else was forming. Quiet, deliberate, cold. That night, I learned one truth. Sometimes people only realize your worth when you're no longer there. And I was about to make that lesson real. I still remember that night, the chill of the wind, the fake warmth of hollow congratulations. If you've ever been through a moment like that, you know silence can be the loudest answer of all. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment below to let me know. And if you love stories about awakening and reclaiming your worth, don't forget to subscribe because the next chapter is only just beginning. I left the party close to midnight, my feet numb from the heels, but my mind clearer than it had been in years. The road along the San Francisco Bay was empty, lined with amber streetlights and the faint rhythm of waves beneath the bridge. I walked without knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't go back. Everything familiar suddenly felt distant. The city, the job I once loved, even the person I had worked so hard to become over the past 6 years. I sat on a stone bench near the pier and pulled out my phone. A message from Rachel, my closest friend at the company, lit up the screen. "I can't believe what just happened. Are you okay?" I stared at it for a long time, then turned the phone off. I wasn't okay, but I didn't want anyone's sympathy. I needed to hold on to whatever dignity I had left, at least until I decided what to do next. When I got back to my small apartment in the Mission District, I slipped off my shoes, tossed my bag on the sofa, and turned on the light. The cold, white glow revealed every detail of the space I'd neglected for months because of work. Stacks of documents still covered the table, and a few coffee mugs sat unwashed. My entire life had revolved around that company. Meetings, reports, midnight emails. I let out a bitter laugh. None of it mattered anymore. I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank screen as if daring me to write something. I clicked on New Mail, typed Ethan's address, and paused. Should I say anything? Should I explain? Should I tell him how deeply he had disappointed me? But then I erased those thoughts and typed one short line. "Ethan, I am submitting my resignation effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity to work with Nova Dynamics. Sincerely, Madison." No flourish, no anger, no accusation. I read it once, then pressed send. When the words "sent" successfully appeared, I leaned back and closed my eyes. A strange feeling spread through my chest, painful but light. Like after years trapped in a locked room, I had finally opened the door. I didn't sleep that night. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the distant city lights. I thought about all those late nights at the office, all the times Ethan said, "You're the one I can always count on," all the dinners I skipped to finish his reports. I once believed loyalty would be repaid. Now I knew, not everyone sees what you give. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. One call from Ethan, then two, then five. I didn't answer. Messages poured in. "We need to talk, Madison. You can't just disappear like this." I deleted them all and silenced the phone. By now, everyone at the office must have known. I could picture Ethan storming into his office, irritation etched on his face, asking his assistant, "Where is she?" And then silence. I opened the window and breathed deeply. The morning air drifted in, carrying mist and the scent of pastries from the bakery below. I stepped onto the balcony, sunlight brushing my skin. From up here, I saw people rushing to work, coffee cups in hand like tiny shields against exhaustion. I used to be one of them, busy, loyal, but lost. Back at the table, I slipped off the silver ring engraved with the Nova Dynamics logo. It had once symbolized pride. Now it was nothing more than decoration. I placed it in a small box, along with my ID badge and a photo of my old team. When I closed the lid, it felt like burying a part of myself, but one that needed to rest. Around noon, Rachel called again. I hesitated, then answered. "Madison, did you really quit?" Her voice trembled. "Yeah," I said softly. "I don't have a reason to stay anymore." There was a sigh on the other end. "Ethan's furious," she said. "He told everyone that no one is irreplaceable." I smiled, not bitterly, just with pity. "He'll learn that's not true soon enough." After the call, I put on my coat and went out for a walk. The sky was clear and sharp. I followed the bayfront path, the one I always came to when I needed to think. Seagulls glided over the water, waves lapped gently against the shore, and the air tasted faintly of salt. 6 years of constant work had made me forget what peace felt like. I stopped midway across the bridge, looking toward the city center. The glass towers gleamed under the sunlight, beautiful but cold. Somewhere inside those offices, hundreds of people like me were still sitting behind their screens, trying to prove their worth to people who would never truly see it. I whispered to myself, "I don't know where I'm going, but at least this time, I'm not walking against myself. Oh, a strong gust of wind blew through, tossing my hair, stinging my eyes, but I smiled. Then I turned my back on the old city and walked away. 3 days after I sent my resignation, I still didn't know what to do next. I spent most of my time at a small cafe on the corner of Valencia Street, where the cappuccino was strong and the old jazz music never stopped playing softly in the background. I brought my laptop, opened it, then closed it again. I scrolled through job listings only to realize I had no desire to return to that same endless grind. Every time I read a description that said things like dynamic environment, high commitment required, I couldn't help but smile faintly. I had lived too many years inside that so called high commitment, only to be met with silence when someone else got the credit. I wasn't sad, not exactly angry either. I just felt empty, a hollow space I didn't yet know how to fill. Maybe that's why, when Logan Pierce's email appeared in my inbox, I read it 3 times before believing it was real. Hi, Madison. I heard about you leaving Nova. I'm building a new team at Arion Labs. We need someone like you, someone with vision, who understands technology, and above all, knows how to lead people. If you have time, I'd love to invite you for coffee. Logan. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the name Logan Pierce. 2 years ago, when I was still at Nova, he had been one of the co-founders and the most respected figure in the company. But Ethan could never stand sharing attention with anyone. The clash between them ended with Logan leaving and Ethan taking absolute control. I still remember that day, Logan walking out of his office, turning to me and saying, "Be careful with his ambition, Madison. It devours everything." I thought he was exaggerating. Now I knew he wasn't. We met the next afternoon. The cafe in Soma was crowded, but Logan stood out, tall, silver-haired, calm. He rose when I arrived, extending a hand. "You look different, Madison. Maybe freedom suits you." I laughed. Freedom, maybe, but also a little lost. We talked for over an hour, most of it about things that had nothing to do with work. He asked about my old projects, how I felt after leaving, and what I would want if I could start over. I answered honestly, I just want to be heard. At Nova, people talked endlessly about innovation, but no one actually listened to those who built it. Logan nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what I want to change at Orion. We're creating something different, something human-centered, not ego-centered. I stayed silent, looking out the window. The afternoon light filtered through the glass and spread across the table. "You want me to join you?" I asked. Logan smiled. "I want you to lead product strategy. I need someone who can see the whole picture, connect scattered pieces into something meaningful. That person is you." I leaned back and exhaled. "I'm not sure I want to go back into this industry. Not after everything that happened." Logan interrupted gently. "Leaving a bad place doesn't mean you gave up. It means you chose the right place to begin again." His words hit something deep. I looked at him and saw not just an offer, but a reminder of belief, the kind I thought I'd lost. We talked a bit longer. He told me about Arion's vision, its small but passionate team, and a new project called Helios that he believed would redefine how companies use AI. As he spoke, I realized what Nova had lost, a soul. At Nova, everything revolved around numbers and reputation. Here, it sounded like people still mattered. When we finished, Logan stood and extended his hand again. "Think about it, Madison. I won't push, but I believe you'll find here what Nova could never give you: respect." That night, I went home and opened my window. The wind from the bay carried the scent of salt and fog. I watched the cars moving below, steady as a heartbeat. Logan's words echoed in my mind: leaving a bad place isn't quitting. Maybe he was right. I opened my laptop and reread his email. The cursor blinked beside the word reply. I typed a few words, hesitated. A part of me was still afraid. I'd gotten too used to being dismissed, overlooked, and silenced. Did I still have the courage to start again, to believe again? I looked toward the city lights flickering in the distance, drew a deep breath, and kept typing. "Thank you, Logan. I accept. When can I start?" When I hit send, it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I didn't know what awaited me at Arion, but for the first time, I was choosing based on faith in myself, not on anyone else's approval. The next morning, I stood before Orion Labs' gleaming glass building. The sign was simple: Orion Labs, building what matters. Sunlight reflected off the glass, making me squint, but inside, I felt clearer than ever. I pushed the door open, hearing the hum of the coffee machine, the chatter of a few people discussing a project, and a warm voice greeting me. Welcome home, Madison. I smiled, truly smiled. Maybe this was where I belonged all along. The first days at Arion Labs passed faster than I expected. There was no grandstanding here, no endless meetings that went nowhere, no empty praise. People worked with focus and honesty. The atmosphere reminded me of my early startup days, when everyone still believed what they were building actually mattered. The office had only 20 people, most of them young engineers, curious, driven, full of ideas. I didn't have to give orders, only directions. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was creating something real, not just trying to survive inside a machine built on ego and politics. On my first morning, Logan walked me through the building. He showed me every small space, every team in motion. His own workspace was nothing more than an open desk, no doors, no glass walls. When I asked why, he smiled. Here we don't hide behind walls. Anyone can walk up and talk to anyone. You too. Pick any desk you like. I nodded, thinking of my old office, where the size of your desk said more about your power than your skill. My first meeting at Arion took place in a small sunlit room. I presented a plan to restructure the AI development workflow. Everyone listened, asked questions, and even challenged my ideas directly. But no one was labeled as difficult. Every opinion mattered. When the meeting ended, Logan said, "This is why I wanted you here. Dialogue, not monologue. You make people feel safe to speak." His words made me smile. At Nova, I once thought I had a voice, until I learned that every decision had already been made before the meeting even started. As Orion kept running smoother each week, I began hearing news from my old company through Rachel, my friend who still worked there. One night she called, her voice low and fast. "Ethan's in trouble. Chloe's team is falling apart. Projects are behind schedule, clients are complaining, and people are quitting." I listened quietly, not sure what I felt. Not joy, not pity either. Maybe just the sense of a pattern I'd already foreseen. "What did he say?" I asked. Rachel gave a short laugh. "He said no one is irreplaceable, but for the first time, he didn't look like he believed it." A few days later, Logan forwarded me an email from Altisys, one of the major clients I'd managed back at Nova. They wanted to meet with me to discuss a potential partnership with Arion. Logan just said, "Looks like your reputation arrived before we did." The meeting took place in a small glass conference room bathed in afternoon light. The Altisys representative shook my hand and said they wanted to work with someone who actually understood their product. I walked them through a plan focused entirely on solving their problems, not showing off Orion's strengths. When it ended, they shook Logan's hand and said they'd send a formal proposal within the week. After they left, Logan turned to me. "That's what Ethan never understood, Madison. Trust can't be bought. It has to be earned." That evening, as I was packing up to leave, Rachel texted me. "Ethan just found out about Altisys moving to Orion. He lost it, slammed the table during a meeting, ordered PR to contain the story." I read it silently. I knew him too well. His anger wasn't about the contract. It was about his pride. The next morning, Rachel called again, her voice tired. "Chloe can't handle it anymore. People are starting to avoid her. Ethan's blaming everyone." The whole floor goes silent when he walks in. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a faint sense of pity. I didn't hate Chloe. She was just cast in the role I once played, a temporary substitute for a structure already cracking. Meanwhile, Orion was thriving. Logan put me in charge of a new project called Helios, a strategic AI platform he'd envisioned for years. I assembled the team, defined roles, and listened to every voice. Everything moved with an ease that almost surprised me. Maybe when people are trusted, they naturally rise to meet it. One evening, Logan passed by my office while I was still working. He stopped at the door. "Madison, don't let work swallow you like before. You've already proven yourself. Now it's time to live a little." I looked up and smiled. I'm learning that. This time it's different. He nodded, satisfied, and left. Before heading out, I glanced at my phone, a new message from Rachel. He's starting to be afraid. I didn't need to ask who she meant. I set the phone down and looked toward the window. The city lights reflected on the glass like a vast mirror. In it, I saw myself, not the woman who once smiled through humiliation at hollow parties, but someone new, calm, steady, free. I turned off the lights and stepped into the quiet hallway. At the end, a small sign glowed softly. Orion Labs, building what matters. I ran my fingers over it and whispered, "That's right. This time, what I build truly matters." News about Altis's partnering with Orion spread through the tech world in just a few days. Forums, news sites, and startup blogs all carried the same headline: Key client leaves Nova Dynamics, signs strategic partnership with Orion Labs. Underneath the articles, people began to comment. Some recognized my name from a short interview Logan had given to Tech Today. In it, he said only one sentence: "We believe in the value of people, not titles." That line made me think of Ethan, the man who believed titles were the only thing that defined someone's worth. That evening, I sat in my small office at Orion, city lights spilling through the window. On the desk was a cup of cold coffee and a stack of Helios project documents. I was reviewing progress reports when a message from Rachel appeared on my screen. "You won't believe this," she wrote. "Ethan just called an emergency meeting with PR. He wants to release a statement saying you left Nova over strategic differences and that the company is doing better than ever." I read the message twice and just smiled. Of course, I had seen it coming. Ethan always needed to control the narrative, even when the truth had long slipped out of his hands. I replied to Rachel, "Let him talk. People will figure it out on their own." 2 days later, Nova Dynamics issued its official press release. It said exactly what Rachel predicted: dry, cautious language meant to calm investors. But the next day, a tech outlet published an anonymous article claiming that a former senior employee was suspected of taking internal data when leaving the company. The article didn't name me, but anyone reading it knew exactly who they meant. My phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters called. Old contacts reached out. Logan stepped into my office while I was still reading the article. He didn't say much, just set a fresh cup of coffee on my desk. "I assume you've seen it," he said quietly. "We can issue a statement in response." I shook my head. "No need. I know what he's trying to do. He wants me to react, to make it look like I have something to hide." Logan studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Calm like this, that's real strength." A few days later, Orion hosted the Helios preview event. I stood on a small stage beside Logan, facing dozens of reporters and partners. When the Q&A started, one journalist raised his hand, his tone half amused. "There's a rumor that Helios is actually based on a project developed years ago at Nova Dynamics. Care to comment, Madison?" The room went silent. I held the microphone and met his gaze. "Ideas are easy to come by," I said slowly, "but how you turn them into something meaningful is what defines you. Helios isn't a copy of anything. It's the result of people who believe in creation, not ownership." For a moment, there was quiet. Then the room erupted in applause. Logan gave a small nod, and I exhaled softly. The video of that event went online the same night and spread quickly. Most of the comments supported me. Some even quoted my line as a kind of mantra: creation, not ownership. That evening, Rachel texted again. Chloe asked him if it was really necessary to go that far. She said Madison doesn't deserve this. Ethan told her coldly, "I'm protecting the company," but I could see it. He's afraid. I set the phone down, my mind filled with the image of Ethan, once so certain, so unwilling to share the spotlight, now scrambling to control what was already gone. In the following days, the atmosphere at Nova grew darker. Rachel told me that in every meeting, Ethan was short-tempered and cold, while Chloe was barely holding it together. She was caught between teams, blamed for everything. One night, while I was reviewing Helios reports, Rachel texted again. Chloe just walked out of a meeting in tears. She said she wishes she could disappear. I looked out the window where the lights of San Francisco shimmered over the water. I didn't feel happy, just aware. At Nova, everyone eventually became part of the machine Ethan built, until it broke them. Logan entered the room holding a file. Tomorrow morning, come with me to meet the government representatives. They're interested in Helios for the Atlas initiative. I looked up, surprised. Atlas? The big federal contract this year? He nodded. That's right. If we get it, Orion will be competing with the giants. I nodded, a strange feeling rising inside me. A year ago, I thought success meant getting promoted at Nova. Now, standing beside Logan, leading a project about to reach the highest stage of recognition, I finally understood what real validation felt like. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, remembering that promotion night, Ethan's smile as he announced someone else's name. Back then, I thought it was the end. Now I knew. It was only a beginning in disguise. Sometimes, the very things people do to diminish you become the reasons you rise. The next morning, I reviewed my documents and adjusted my hair in the mirror. Seeing myself in the simple black suit, I smiled. I was no longer the woman standing in the corner of a party, forcing a smile while being overlooked. I was someone new. And no matter what Ethan did next, I knew he no longer had any power over my life. News that Ariane had made the shortlist for the Atlas project spread quickly through the tech world. It was a government-funded contract worth tens of millions, aimed at building an artificial intelligence platform to support public services. Only 3 companies had been selected to present their proposals: Nova Dynamics, Orion Labs, and a large New York conglomerate. When Logan announced the news in the team meeting, the room erupted in cheers. I only smiled faintly, but inside I understood this wasn't just an opportunity. It was the confrontation we had both known would come. Nova and Orion were finally standing on opposite sides of the field. That afternoon, while I was reviewing documents, Logan came in and took the seat across from me. I know this won't be easy for you, he said, but you need to be ready. Ethan won't stay still. He'll do anything to win. I answered quietly, I know. But this time, I have nothing left to lose. Across town, chaos was brewing inside Nova Dynamics. Late that night, Rachel called, her voice low and urgent. Madison, something's wrong. Ethan's rewriting the internal files for Atlas, but he's asking Chloe to alter the financial figures and replace some names on the project list. I frowned. Replace who? Rachel hesitated. He says it's a mock presentation version, but everyone knows it's the real submission. When Chloe questioned him, he just said, Do it. Don't ask. I sat there listening to the wind outside the window. I knew Ethan could be ruthless, but I hadn't expected him to risk outright fraud. Do you have proof? I asked. Rachel sighed. Chloe snapped photos of some drafts, but she's terrified. She said if he finds out, she's finished. The next day, Nova released a statement bragging about a breakthrough in safe AI, a calculated move to shape public perception ahead of the Atlas pitch. The media attention followed fast, full of glowing articles praising Ethan's leadership. But inside, the truth was rotting. Chloe was being pushed to the brink, working without rest. Rachel texted, I think she's breaking. She doesn't talk to anyone anymore, just works, then cries in the restroom. On Friday night, while I was polishing Orion's presentation, an email arrived from an unknown address. The subject line read only one word: truth. Inside were attachments, images, drafts, and internal notes from Nova showing that Ethan had ordered the data changes himself. At the bottom was a single line: I can't let him keep getting away with this. Please do the right thing. See, I knew instantly who it was: Chloe. I sat there for a long time before opening the files. Part of me wanted to delete everything and walk away, but another part, the one that had endured humiliation, manipulation, and silence, couldn't ignore it. I opened each file carefully. It was all there, word for word. Ethan wasn't just unethical. He had crossed a legal line. I called Logan. I have something you need to see. A long breath came through the line. I suppose Ethan just buried himself, he said. By Monday morning, the tech headlines exploded. A respected publication ran an expose. Nova Dynamics, accused of manipulating data in Atlas project proposal. The article cited leaked internal records and included screenshots of evidence. Ethan immediately held a press conference denying everything, calling it a smear campaign. But the harder he tried to defend himself, the more the world doubted him. Rachel texted me that morning. He's losing it. The office is chaos. Chloe's gone. No one knows where she is. I went silent. Part of me feared for her, but another part knew she'd just done the bravest thing she could. Logan entered the conference room with a newspaper in hand. You know who did this, don't you? I nodded. Someone who once trusted Ethan. Now she's trying to make it right. Logan paused for a moment, then said quietly, We won't mention it. The truth will spread on its own. Let's stay focused on our work. That afternoon, as I left the office, rain started to fall. I stood under the awning, watching people run for cover. In that moment, I felt both relieved and sad. Ethan had built a system where everyone had to choose between loyalty and conscience, and the very person he'd lifted up had become the one to bring him down. Late that night, Rachel called again, her voice breaking. You wouldn't believe it. The board called an emergency meeting. Ethan screamed, threw papers, and blamed everyone. I think he knows Chloe was the source. It was awful, Madison. He completely lost control. I listened quietly. Maybe silence was the only response Ethan deserved now. Before bed, I opened my laptop and reviewed the final plan for Helios. In my inbox was a new message from Logan. Tomorrow's the Atlas rehearsal. Get some rest. You've done enough. I closed the screen and lay still in the dark. Outside, the rain kept falling, soft and steady, like the past knocking on the window. I thought of Chloe, the young woman once celebrated at that promotion party, now the only one brave enough to tell the truth. A quiet sense of gratitude filled my chest. This story was no longer about me or Ethan. It was about those who choose what's right, even when it costs them everything. And tomorrow, when the sun rises, I'll stand before the Atlas Committee, not for revenge, but to prove that integrity still has a place in this world. The next morning, the city seemed brighter than usual. I arrived at the office early, the scent of last night's rain still lingering in the air. Logan was already in the conference room, the final presentation file for the Atlas project spread neatly before him. When I stepped inside, he looked up with a faint smile. Ready? He asked. More than ever, I replied. Everyone at Orion was tense, but focused. The Atlas project wasn't just a chance to prove ourselves, it was our moment to show that integrity could win, that you didn't have to play dirty to succeed. The morning passed quickly, filled with rehearsals, slide reviews, and data checks. Every detail was inspected. Logan believed our presentation only needed to show the true value of Orion, no theatrics required. I was more cautious. After everything I'd been through, I knew Ethan wouldn't stay quiet, and I was ready for that. 3 days earlier, I had deliberately allowed a draft version of our strategy, filled with incorrect figures and misleading directions, to leak through a contact connected to the press. I hadn't told anyone, not even Logan. The document looked identical to the real one, except for a few key details only I knew. If Ethan was still trying to manipulate the narrative, I knew he'd take the bait. That afternoon, just as I expected, tech forums exploded with talk about Orion's leaked plan. Commentators said we weren't ready for a project as ambitious as Atlas, that our approach was unrealistic. I read the posts, unsurprised. When Rachel called, her voice was tight with concern. Ethan just held a quick press event, she said. He made a snide remark, something like, People can leave, but the real talent stays. Looks like he believes the fake draft. I smiled. Let him. The day of the presentation arrived. The city's main convention hall buzzed with tension. I carried only a thin folder in my hand. The government representatives sat in the front row. Across the aisle, I saw Ethan. Flawless suit, polished posture, but a hint of fatigue behind his eyes. When our gazes met, he gave a faint smile, less confident than before, more like a defense. Ethan presented first. His delivery was sharp, his numbers perfect, but to me, it all sounded like déjà vu. Polished, full of slogans, empty of soul. A few committee members nodded. Others just took notes in silence. Then it was our turn. Logan gave a brief introduction and handed the stage to me. I walked up, faced the wide room, and felt my heartbeat steady. Atlas, I began, isn't just a technology project. It's a chance to bring artificial intelligence back to serving people, not replacing them. The line was simple, but a few heads lifted in the audience. I spoke about how Helios, the platform we'd built, could integrate seamlessly into Atlas. I avoided jargon, skipped grand promises. Instead, I told them how it could help clerks process information faster, how it could make public, services more accessible to everyday citizens. I ended with a sentence that reporters would later quote everywhere. Technology is only truly intelligent when it's built by people with heart. When I stepped down, the hall was quiet for a moment. Then came the applause. Logan squeezed my shoulder. Well done. That afternoon, the committee met behind closed doors. Logan and I waited in a nearby cafe, the smell of roasted coffee thick in the air. He stared out the window, his voice low. You know, no matter the result, I'm proud. The way you led, the way you carried this team, you made Orion a reflection of yourself. I smiled. I only did what I believed was right. When we returned to the hall, the air was electric. The chair of the committee stood and read the decision. After careful review, we have chosen Orion Labs as the official partner for the Atlas project. The room erupted. Logan gripped my hand. I stood still, every sound fading into silence. Across the aisle, Ethan remained seated, his head slightly bowed, his face blank. I didn't feel triumphant, only the quiet recognition that something had finally ended. That night, headlines lit up across every major outlet. Orion Labs defeats Nova Dynamics in Atlas bid. Journalists called Orion the new symbol of ethical innovation. Some even labeled me the woman who shattered the glass ceiling. The titles felt distant. I knew what truly lay behind them: years of unseen struggle and silence. Later, in the dim office, I sat before my computer reading those stories. A message from Rachel appeared. Ethan just left the company. The board called an emergency meeting. They're preparing an internal audit. He hasn't said a word since this afternoon. No one has to. Everyone knows. I closed the laptop. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. I walked to the window. Outside, the city lights reflected on glass towers, glowing gold, like another world alive beneath the surface. I thought about the road that brought me here, about the night I sent that resignation email, about Ethan, the man who once believed he couldn't lose. This victory wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been dismissed, overlooked, or silenced for not being loud enough. I turned off the lights and stepped into the hallway. Before leaving, I stopped by the glowing sign at the end of the corridor, Orion Labs, building what matters. This time, I whispered, we really did. A soft breeze drifted through, carrying the feeling of a new chapter opening. Somewhere in the city, Ethan was probably sitting alone in a dark office, surrounded by shattered contracts and fading ambitions. And me, I was finally standing exactly where I belonged. For the first time in years, I didn't need anyone's approval to know that. 2 weeks after Arion's victory in the Atlas project, the city felt quieter, or maybe it was just that my own mind finally was. Life moved fast again. Meetings, interviews, new contracts, expansion plans. Logan told me to take a few days off, but I stayed. I wasn't tired, just not used to stepping back when things were finally running right. That morning, as I was preparing for a strategy session, my assistant walked in and placed an envelope on my desk. Someone left this for you. No name. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly handwritten. We need to talk. E. I read it several times. Just one letter, but enough for me to know who it was. Ethan. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. I had known this moment would come, the inevitable conversation neither of us could avoid. That afternoon, I drove through the financial district, past the glass towers that shimmered in the light. The Nova Dynamics building still stood tall like a scar on the city. The revolving doors gleamed, but the inside felt different now. No rush of people, no echoes of ambition, just silence and stale air. The receptionist hesitated when I gave my name, then nodded. I have a meeting with Mr. Ethan Ward. The glass door to his office was half open. I stepped in. The room looked the same, only emptier. The framed photos of the executive board were gone, and papers lay scattered on his desk. Ethan looked up. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes. Voice was rough. Thank you for coming, he said. I sat across from him, hands clasped. You said you wanted to talk. He nodded, glancing toward the window. The last light of day outlined the lines on his face. The company isn't what it used to be, he began quietly. So soft I had to lean forward. They're reviewing every contract. The board doesn't trust me anymore. They say I've lost direction. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Maybe they're right. I said nothing. His eyes met mine. No arrogance, no defiance, only emptiness. I know you don't need excuses, but I still want to say it. I was wrong. I let my ego consume everything. My tone stayed even. You don't need to tell me that. I figured it out long ago. Ethan lowered his head, hands tightening. It took me too long to realize you were the one person I should never have underestimated. When you left, I thought I could still control everything. But one by one, it all slipped away. The projects, the clients, the trust. Now there's nothing left. He looked up again, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I want you to come back, Madison. I can convince the board, make you an executive partner. I know it's late, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I looked at him for a long time, not out of shock, but to see whether it was regret or fear driving his words. Finally, I said softly but firmly, "You had 6 years to say that, Ethan. 6 years to do the right thing. I don't need it now." He pressed his lips together, as if swallowing more words. The air grew heavy. I stood, but he spoke again, almost pleading. "If I had understood you then the way I do now, maybe things would have been different." I paused at the door and turned back. "Maybe. But you lost the one thing that matters most, trust. And no company or title can ever buy that back." Ethan looked down at his desk, silent. I knew the conversation was over. I walked out, the door clicking softly behind me, a quiet sound that still felt like the closing of a chapter. The hallway was empty, neon light reflecting off the polished stone. I kept walking, feeling lighter with each step. I wasn't triumphant, and I wasn't pitying, just settled. Everything was finally where it belonged. Outside, the wind picked up. I looked up at the gray sky as the city lights began to glow like stars. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "The board just asked him to resign. It's official." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. No reply was needed, no words at all. I opened my car door and glanced at the rearview mirror. The Nova Dynamics tower faded into the distance, just another dim block of light among thousands. For me, that chapter was truly closed. On the drive home, the radio host's voice filled the quiet car. Orion Labs has signed 2 new contracts following the Atlas project, solidifying its lead in the AI industry. I smiled faintly, watching the steady flow of headlights across the bridge. Not because of victory, but because I understood something now. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't fighting to be seen. It's walking away and letting them realize your worth when it's already too late. That night, when I reached home, I stood on the balcony overlooking the bay. The city lights shimmered across the dark water, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain. Finally, I whispered to myself, I'm free. 3 months after my last meeting with Ethan, everything had settled into a new rhythm. Orion Labs was growing faster than even Logan or the rest of us had imagined. The Atlas project was in its first deployment phase, and invitations kept coming to conferences, panels, and interviews about innovation. But what surprised me most wasn't the recognition or the attention. It was the quiet inside me, a peace I once thought I'd never feel again. One crisp autumn morning, just after I finished a virtual call with our partners, Logan walked in holding an ivory-colored envelope. "They're inviting you to speak at the Women in Innovation conference this year," he said, voice calm but proud. I took the card, reading it carefully. Under the bold headline was my name, keynote speaker, Madison Clark, Chief Strategy Officer, Orion Labs. I looked up at him, half smiling. I thought those conferences were for people who like to talk about themselves. Logan chuckled. "Maybe. But you have a story worth telling, and 100 others who need to hear it." I fell silent, staring out the window. The sky was clear, the wind gentle against the glass towers outside. Maybe he was right. Some stories aren't meant just to be told. They're meant to be closed. The conference day arrived, and the downtown San Francisco Convention Center was packed. More than half the seats were filled before the program even began. I stood backstage, listening as the host introduced me. Today, we welcome a woman who faced disappointment and turned it into change, Madison Clark. The stage lights flared as I walked out. Applause rippled through the room, warm but not overwhelming. I took a breath, smiled, and began. I used to believe my worth was measured by how others saw me. For 6 years, I worked to prove I deserved to be recognized. But one night, at a promotion party, I realized something. Sometimes you can do everything right and still be in the wrong place. The room went still. Faces in the crowd watched quietly, some smiling, some nodding. I left that night, I continued, and everything started to change. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to let silence or disregard define me. I chose to believe I could start over. I paused for a beat, then smiled again. I once stood under bright lights, smiling to hide the pain of watching someone else get the credit. Today, these lights don't scare me anymore. The applause this time was louder, fuller. A few people stood, phones rose, recording. But through it all, my eyes caught a familiar face in the back row, Ethan. He sat quietly, no longer the man who used to command a room. Simple shirt, no tie, hair slightly unkempt. When he noticed me looking, he gave a small nod, a silent greeting. I returned a faint smile, not bitter, not cold, just an acknowledgement between two people who had survived the same war and finally laid down their weapons. When the program ended, people came up to shake hands, take photos, exchange cards. Through the crowd, I saw Ethan leaving quietly, just as he had arrived. I didn't call out. There was nothing left to say, and that was exactly how it should be. That evening, I stepped out onto the balcony of the convention hall. The air was cool, the wind from the bay carrying a trace of salt. Below, car lights moved in endless streams through the city. I held a cup of tea and leaned against the railing. A young journalist approached with a smile. "Your speech was incredible," she said. "If I could ask one last question, what's the most important thing you've learned?" I looked out across the water and answered, "Sometimes, for others to see your worth, you have to walk away, not to prove anything, but to finally see yourself clearly." She nodded, thanked me, and left. I stayed, watching the reflections of city lights shimmer across the bay. In that moment, I understood there's no greater victory than finding peace within yourself. Far ahead, the San Francisco sky glowed bright. I closed my eyes, letting the wind sweep through my hair, and smiled. The road had been long, full of scars and lessons. But standing there in the light, not for anyone else, but for myself, I knew I had finally arrived where I was meant to be. At last, I was free.